Hey, welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm just going to be going over some of the things I've added and changed since the last upload. So with that, let's get started. So starting off with, we are in the new drag strip map that I created. So it's meant to look like an official drag strip venue, kinda. So we have the light trees over here. We have a couple of pavilions on either side. We have markers where the cars are supposed to start from. And then we also have a couple of trees placed at random locations just to make the map look a little bit interesting as the player drives through it, instead of just having empty hills that don't really have much character. And then we have markings over here to mark this is the quarter, and then this is the half, and then we go further down, we eventually get to the mile long. So depending on which one you select from within the garage, the checkpoint will be shifted accordingly. And then there's a little runoff over here for if you do the mile long, and the post race screen comes up, so then the car has some space to run off while you look at the data. And then we also have a blocking volume here, just in case the player wants to ram the AI in the event that you are losing the race. So no cheating will take place, and that's pretty much it. It works the same way as any other tracker, but there is a difference in that instead of having stagnant pre-selected cars, the cars for the drag level will be dependent on the player's car's max torque at the time. So if the player's car has less than 450 Newton meters of max torque, then you will get a tier 1 car. That's pretty much the threshold. And then if the player's car has more than 451 but less than 600, then you'll get a tier 2 car. And if you have more than 601 to 750, you'll get a tier 3 car. And then 751 to 900 will be tier 4. Those will be the total tiers that will be in the game. So as you can see right now, I think the current car has about 370. So we have that car, that's a tier 1 car. And then if I play again, hopefully the other car will spawn in. Okay, let's try this again because it is random, so you're not gonna guarantee to get it. There's the other car. So now we have the other car, and then if we go and change the car's max torque, we're gonna put it at something like 500, and then we're gonna compile and then play the level. As you can see, we now have a different car. And then if we play again, I'm gonna try again, and then there's the other car. So as you can see, it does adjust according to the torque value in the blueprint structure. Now it's 370. So that is everything for pertaining to the drag level. That is it. There's nothing else to it. Now I just need to finish up the code for that, or not finish up the code, but rather add the other cars, but that will come later. Moving on, we have also changed the way the transmission is handled in the game. The idea behind this was that for drag racing, you will be forced to drive in manual. So over here, I have a manual transmission setup. It does check. I created a variable in the BP save game called auto, which is set in the garage level. We also have the option of the player selecting whether they want to drive using the manual transmission or the automatic transmission. So that also works here, but if for drag racing it will be exclusively manual, but that will come later because I haven't yet added the ref indicator. I think it was like the cluster for it, like as you would have in a normal drag setup in a racing game. The one on the left that goes from bottom to top. Currently I only have let me just show here. Currently I only have the one here in the bottom right setup. That is pretty much what I have. So for now we are going with the auto, and then if you do then turn this to manual, then you race in manual in the. But I do have something else in place in turn that I wanted to play around with, and that is the ref light or shift lights that happens in sports cars. If you look towards the top of the screen, you can see green, yellow, red, and then it changes continuously as that happens. So the threshold for that is, so here once again we get the BP prime because everything happens in the prime. That is the parent class. So what happens is I have a couple of variables. We have a current RPM, which is set. This is the shift setup. Let me just go over this real quick so I can So over here we have the automatic transmission, and then in here we have the current RPM. This works quite well. And then we have a current RPM, shift up RPM, and then a shift down RPM. But for the purpose of here, we have a shift up, and then we multiply it by 0.46, so that's the threshold. So if the RPM for the car is lower than 46% of the change up RPM, then the shift lights will not appear. But once it surpasses that, then the green ones will appear. Right over here, you see the shift lights. If it's lower then true, it remains hidden, and once it breaks that threshold, it then becomes visible, and then the green lights show. And then we go on to the next one, which is if it's more than 69% of the shift up RPM but less than 89% of the shift RPM, then the yellow lights come into view and then they become visible. And if that's not true, then they become hidden. Actually, the condition for that, because I ran into a little problem where if it broke, then it would just completely disappear. So I didn't want that to happen, because if you surpassed, say for example, you surpassed 89, then the yellow would also disappear. So it wouldn't just disappear when you go lower, then also go when you go above it. So instead of having it straight go from the false, it went from the false to a branch and then true. So the condition here for that is similar to the one over here, which just says if it's less than, then it must disappear, right? And then for the red, we have if it's greater than 89% of the shift up RPM, then it will flash red. I want to add one more portion of code here for the flashing part, but I'm still trying to figure out how am I going to do that. But once I get that right, then I'll probably add it. If not, then it will just go red. You'll just see green, yellow, and red without the flashing. So I'm actually quite happy with the code as it is now. And then going back to the prime for the transmission, right? I've already shown the manual transmission, how it works. Oh no, I didn't. So in the change up, we have the gear variable. So this just holds the current gear. And then we have a max gear. So this is set in each vehicle, right? Because not all the cars are the same. Some have 6 speeds, some have 7 speeds, some have 8 speeds. So it will be dependent on each car. Those will be set in each individual blueprint. And then it takes the current gear and then adds it by 1. And then here we have a gear change. This is just this part over here, the +1 for the change up. And then it will add 1. And then it will have a boolean called gear change. So while this boolean is true, the player will be unable to increase the cost throttle. It will completely shut down, as we have, where did I put it? So much going on here. Over here by the throttle, as you can see here, we have a branch with a gear change, where only if it's false, meaning no gears is changing, then we can throttle. But also in the code itself, and we set the throttle to 0 when the gear change is happening, and then we set the new gear to whatever it was over there. And then after that, we then have a delay of 0.1. So this pretty much simulates, I think it's a dual clutch transmission of 0.1, and then it will delay that, set the new gear, and then set the gear change back to false, meaning the player can once again throttle the car. And then for the change down, it's just the opposite. It's exactly the same. The only difference is instead of adding, we subtract. And then we also put a condition, since for the change down is a little bit different. Instead of having the max gears, we have -1, which represents the reverse gear. So if the current gear is greater than reverse, then we can change down. Otherwise, if it's not, then we're not gonna change down at all. And then it pretty much follows the same procedure as over here. And then here, where we set the new target gear, we use the gear, which has been set in the function at the end. And then we use that to determine what the new target gear will be. So that is the manual transmission, and the same for the automatic transmission. This one just is a little bit different. So this is a custom event, because I didn't want to put it on the event tick, because I saw a video somewhere where it said that if you put things on the event tick, it's a little bit more intensive. So instead I made a custom event, and then I added a timer by event, and then made it looping. So it checks for the auto variable, which sits in here, which I explained earlier. And then if it's true, it will then go for the automatic. If it's false, it will go for the manual. And then we set the current RPM. And then again, much like with the throttle, check for the gear change. If it's false, then we go through the process. So we check if the current RPM is greater than the shift up RPM and the gear is lesser than the max gears, and then we will use that to then shift up a gear, and then go through the same procedure, set it, and then set the gear change back to false. And then for the change down, it's the same. So it's current, shift down RPM, and then we check the gear, and then if it's greater than 1. So I ran into a little problem with neutral when setting up this code. So if the car is in neutral, then it refuses to change up or down. So I completely eliminated neutral, making it so that the car can only go into first gear at lowest. So if it's greater than 1, then we can shift down. If it's equal to or less than, then it will just remain in first gear. But you still go through neutral when you're changing gears. So you'll still see the N up here if you look closely on the gauge cluster. So it will be like 1 and 2, and then 2 and 3. So it will behave similar to what a manual transmission would behave like in real life, or at least visually. That's how it would behave. And then we're allowed to shift down, and then set the gear with delay, and then go through that. That is the new setup. Here's a quick host main recording insert because I forgot to display the manual transmission and all its glory. So currently we are in auto mode, as you can see. So in auto mode, the car will shift by itself. And then if I just go to the PP save game real quick, the auto variable, set that to false, and then compile and save, and then play the level again. It will behave the same when the race starts, going to first. But now it won't change. It will pretty much just sit there until I decide to change the gears. And you change gears with the either left or right shift for shift up, and then either the left or right control for shift down. Let me just show what this looks like once again. So we go shift up again, and then shift down, and then shift down again. And at this point your pistons are flying out of your engine bay, because why would you do that to your car? But yes, that's pretty much how the manual works in comparison to the automatic. The field of view also had a little change, because this actually does look better than the one I used in the tutorial series, in that if the threshold is broken, it will forcibly set the new field of view, and if you're below the threshold, which currently is 120 kilometers, it will then pull you back to default. With the one I used in the tutorial series, it wouldn't pull you back until the car slowed down, which was kind of a problem. So I changed it by using a timeline, and then we set it in that particular from 90 to 105. And then this is the new input also, because with the new setup, with the automatic manual transmission setup, I am now capable of making it so that at the beginning of a race you can rev the car, right? So you don't just stand stationary. Let me just show that real quick. So at the beginning of the race, you are allowed to now rev up the car and then start it at something like that. So you're not capable of doing that. Mind you, this does not work with the auto transmission from Chaos. So if you use the automatic transmission over here, this setup will not work, because as far as Chaos is concerned, this does not affect it at all. It will run its algorithm as it's intended to. So if you're going to use the setup with the set gear to neutral, and then delay, and then set it to first, then you can't use the automatic transmission. If you do use it, let me just show. So we set it to true, and then compile this, and then play. See, it's currently neutral. If I accelerate, it goes straight into 1, so it doesn't care at all. So it only works if you disable the automatic transmission. It pretty much also overrides this automatic transmission that you would have created. So if you created your own one, then it will also override that. It's not gonna care. It's gonna take priority over whatever you have set up. And then I also have this, which is a new toggle drive reverse, which in context of the game, the way I'm pursuing the game is more of a simcade kind of setup. So sticking in line with that, because most of the time you'll probably be in automatic mode, so I wanted to simulate like in an automatic car where you have reverse and you have drive, right? So you have to move between them as you're driving. So we have a new setup, new enhanced input, drive reverse. So you click a button, so it also checks whether you're in auto mode, and this will only work if you're in auto. So as you can see, auto, true, and then it will say if the gear is equal to 1, then you are allowed to shift into reverse, and if you're in reverse, then you're allowed to shift back into first. Like I said earlier, I do have a problem with neutral with the setup, in that once you're in neutral, regardless of if you're accelerating, the car will remain in neutral. It just doesn't go out of neutral. So to overcome that, I had to just completely eliminate neutral altogether, except for in manual drive. In manual drive, because you control which gear you're in, you can go into neutral if you want to, you can go to reverse, you can go from neutral to first, because you control the entire gear selection with that. The other thing that I added was a new camera setup. So instead of the simple flip-flop, we only had 2 cameras, now we have 4 cameras. So I'll explain what they are. We have the hood camera, roof camera, and then the rear camera, which is one at the back. And then we also have a rear facing camera, which is just your look back camera. And then this is pretty much how the code works. We deactivate everything, and then we switch based on the camera index between the cameras. So if I go play, if you press C, you can see you switch between all of the cameras like so, and then it will just activate the new selected camera. And then here for the rear facing camera, it's pretty much the same thing, where you deactivate all the cameras and then activate the rear facing camera, but then once you let go of it, it will activate whatever camera has been selected. So if I go play the level, let's say for example I go to the hood camera and then I press B to look back, and then I go back, it goes back to the hood camera, so it remembers which one you last had selected. So as you can see, if I change to the roof camera, I look back to the roof, rear camera, so that works nicely. We now have that also, and that pretty much covers everything that I have added and changed since the last upload. That is where the game currently stands. That is everything for now, and until the next video.